Well, good morning, gang, and welcome again to another morning coffee and a thought brought to you by Wings of Faith Ministries here in Sarnia. It's kind of a rainy, dreary day this morning here in the city, but we're going to try and make the best of it. Last week, I had said that it's wonderful to look back at some of the weird, unusual, but wonderful stories that make up the Old Testament of our Bibles. You know, the Apostle Paul says that these stories were recorded and accounted for to be examples. In other words, they're to benefit us in our daily lives. We can learn from them. And so this week we're going to take a look at another kind of unusual story that's recorded for us in 2 Kings chapter 13. Before we get there, I want to remind you that morning coffee and a thought, or thoughts from the Word, can be seen on our Wings of Faith YouTube channel beginning at 1 p.m. on Fridays, and on our Facebook page beginning at 8 a.m. on Sunday mornings. We hope you will join us. If these thoughts or messages minister or resonate with you, we hope that you would like and subscribe to our channel. Also, if you have a prayer request, if you want information or you want to make a donation to this ministry, you can do all of that at wingsoffaithministries.ca. And now let's get back to our story. As the backdrop to our story, the 10 tribes that made up the nation of Israel had a long-term border dispute with their northern neighbors, the Armenians, led by King Hazael. And so constant territory was being shifted back and forth. It is during this long-term war between Israel and the Armenians, or as we would call them, the Syrians today, that an event takes place. A great prophet in Israel is now coming to the end of his life. The prophet Elijah is stricken with a disease, and he is about to die. The king of Israel, King Joash, comes to Elisha's home to bid the great prophet farewell. He's in the room with the prophet, and he really senses the presence of God. He describes it as chariots of fire surrounding them. But it's in these last moments of Elisha's life that he says to the king, grab these bow and these arrows. And so the king takes them. Elisha then tells him to open up the window of the room that faces the east. The king does so. Then Elisha, putting his hands on top of the hands of King Joash, says to him, fire an arrow out that window. It'll be the arrow of victory for you. And so the king complies and shoots the arrow outside of the east window. Then Elisha says to him, take the rest of the arrows and fire them into the ground. King Joash takes the arrows, but he only fires 3 of them and stops. The old prophet says to him, why did you stop? Why didn't you shoot 5 or 6 arrows? Then he prophesies to him, and he says, because you only shot 3 of the 5 or 6 arrows I gave you, you are going to defeat the Armenians, but you will only defeat them 3 times. If you'd have fired all the arrows, in other words, if you'd have continued, you would have conquered him for good and had rest forever on your border. A strange story. Hundreds of years later, Jesus, while traveling through Galilee and ministering to different villages, towns, and of course at the water's edge of the Sea of Galilee, told a popular parable. We call it the parable of the sower and the seed, recorded in Mark chapter 4, but also recorded in Matthew and Luke. In this parable, Jesus makes an analogy about how we as human beings receive the Word of God. The seed, as Jesus said, will fall into 4 types of soil. In other words, saying that humans receive the Word of God in 4 different ways. But it's the third way that I want to center on, because I think it really ties in to our Old Testament story. He says, when some people receive the Word of God, they start out great. But when it's planted on soil that has thorns around it, the seed is planted, the plant starts to grow, but then the thorns begin to choke it. What he was saying is that sometimes we receive the Word of God, but the cares of life around us, or the desire for other things, come into our lives and they choke the Word of God. In other words, we receive the Word of God, but we never quite mature with the Word of God. We never bear the fruit that we're really designed to bear. In other words, we miss our opportunities in God. King Jehoash of Israel missed his opportunity. When he could have shot 5 or 6 arrows and totally put the kingdom of Aram to rest, he failed to do it. He shot 3. We'll never know the reason why, in his case, he didn't continue and win a total victory. But we have to take that story as an example. We can receive the Word of God, but the thorns or life around us can choke the Word of God from us. So instead of firing all our arrows, we start off firing them, but then stop for some reason and never reach the maturity that God has designed for us. And so my thought this morning is this. When you receive the Word of God, when God speaks to you and gives you that bow and arrow, fire all your arrows. Don't stop, and don't let the things around you stop you or cause you to miss the opportunities that God has given you. God has done everything for us. It was all accomplished at the cross of Christ. You may be listening to me this morning, and what I've said resonates with you. You've kind of drifted or wandered away from what you believe God has spoken to you and have kind of missed opportunities. Well, now's a great time to get back on the trail, to grab that bow and those arrows. Fire all the arrows today, not just 3 of them. Don't let the thorns of life choke the Word of God and the revelation of God to your heart out of you. Bear the fruit that God has designed you to bear for His kingdom. Listen, have a good day, enjoy your coffee, and we'll see you again next week.